Well, how's everybody doing? Good. Any closings today? No? All right. Maybe tomorrow, right? There we go. Well, let's get started. My name is Jay Cohn. My company is called Grow Development. Okay. I am partners with Boyd Brown in Grow Development, and he's the OP for the Mid-Val and the Salt Lake office for Keller Williams. Also partners with Johnny and Clay down here. So if you ever met Boyd, that's who's my business partner. If you haven't, he'll be excited to meet you one day. So a little bit of background about me. I started in acquisitions and development back in 2012, and I actually worked for home builders. So I started with Alpine Homes. Then I went and worked with Oakwood Homes, and then I started the Toll Brothers division here in Utah when they expanded to Utah. And then about 3 years ago, partnered with Boyd and we started Grow Development. So for my background, I've had a pretty blessed career. I've been able to do about 4,000 lots across the Wasatch Front, and that's from every shape and size of project. And that's residential. And then since doing Grow, we've also done light industrial, some multifamily, as well as a little bit of commercial development too. So what I'm going to do today, okay, and it was Chris, do you want to make an extra 25 grand next year? Yeah, Cameron, 50 grand? Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, I'm going to show you how, guys. So for land acquisition deals, all right, they take time. All right. If that's anything you take away today, is just know it's not a house deal. Okay. It's not selling normal residential. It takes time to go get approvals through the city. It takes time to work with the sellers. It takes time sometimes to do financing. So just expect a longer timeline. Okay. But higher purchase prices, higher sales prices, bigger deals means bigger commissions. Okay. But what I want to share with you, I'm your buyer. Okay. So you don't have to go find any buyers. You go find a land deal, I will buy it. Okay. So that takes a whole step out of the equation. As well as being your buyer, I'll do all the work. Okay. All you need to do, be involved in the contract process. And then if you want to, you can ride shotgun and learn the whole process. We'll involve you on everything. We'll show you what we do to work with the city, show you what we do working with engineers, show what we do for the property research and the study on the property to prepare it for development. I can do all that stuff and you'll just get a front row seat to it. Okay. So some pretty cool things that we've been able to do. In 2025, we've paid over $370,000 in commissions to our agents that have brought land deals to us. Okay. So some pretty fun ones. Estates at Major Farms was up in Layton, and that was a piece I'll show you a little bit later. But that came from a cold call from an agent that was in one of our offices. Just called the family, connected with them, and then we were able to assemble 5 property owners in that project and make it a big, nice real estate, transaction, residential project. But it took 13 months to get the approvals through the city. So that one took some time. That agent, again, brought it in, helped us a little bit on the contract phase, and then just said, take the reins, make it happen. And we did the rest. And so that was a $78,000 commission. And you can kind of see the rest of the sheet there. We've been very heavily involved in working with agents. Okay. We think having you as a separate set of eyes out there looking for land deals only helps us, helps you as we're a buyer for you. And you can count on us to perform. We've had some pretty good success working with agents. So again, you can kind of see those different commission ranges. One I do want to point out is number 5. That particular agent, it was a small deal, so they got a little commission on it, but it's an agent that we really like and really trust, and so we're partnering with her. She's getting a finder's fee out of it, as well as she's came in on some of the finance on it. So she gets upside kind of in 3 different sets on that particular project. So it'll work out really well for her. She'll get about $50,000 in income off that one particular project. So, okay, a couple things we're gonna go over today. Identifying land deals, some site analysis, a little bit of education and expectations that you need to talk with your property owners, landowners. and then how you're going to work with us. Okay. So a couple things on identifying potential land deals. We'll go through these categories today. Okay. Vacant piece of land, existing homes with, back pastures, back additional acreage, and then underutilized property and redevelopment opportunities. Okay. So these are all things you can keep an eye out for. So this is that first piece. This was Estates at Major Farms up in Layton. What are some things you guys notice about this property? What are some things that you see on the map right off the bat? It's in the middle of everything. Okay. What was that? Surrounded by homes. Anything else? Couple access points, right? We've got some stub streets here, main road here. Anything else? Multiple parcels. What's it used for right now? Just farming, right? Agricultural. You don't have to knock anything down. You essentially scrape the topsoil, start building construction right away. Okay. So on this particular deal, it was teed up, ready to go, and we had to work with this one landowner first. They had about 10 acres. Okay. That was the main deal that we had structured, that we got contracted with the family, and that's actually the Major family, so that's why we called it Major Farms. Then after we got them under contract and ready to go, we went to all these other landowners that had these back portions of their property, and we assembled all of them together for one transaction, one deal. So it's a little blurry, but we ended up getting 35 single-family lots approved. They were all third to half-acre lots. Utilities were pretty simple because they were all stubbed right there. The challenge on this one was working with the city. So every city is different. Every city is supposed to have the same system and process according to the state legislature and the state code for development, but they don't. They interpret it their own way. So every time we submitted, we'd have to wait about a month for Layton City to respond to us. They would say, don't call us, we'll call you. And it was a pain. So that was a challenge. Keep that in mind as you're working with your landowners, as you're working with, a property owner, an estate, whatever. Just let them know this takes time. How I like to structure that conversation is, hey, they can give you an offer. They can give you a value just to buy a farm. That is not the same value. That's not the same price as a potential development. So if you want a value for potential development, keep in mind you're going to have to consider some time in order for them to go do that. Okay. All right. What do you think about this one? What are some things that you see? Anything? Just one access? Yep, so there's a stub street there. Anything else? Yep. So this was a cool deal. One of our agents, I don't know if you ever met him, Mike Gable. Do you guys know Mike Gable or heard of him? He knew this landowner and was able to come to us and said, hey, I've got a seller. He's thinking about selling. What can you guys do for him? He's kind of got this investment property in Mill Creek. Looking to get a little bit more money. He wants to buy a new Corvette. So we're like, all right, great. We can figure that out. So we ended up contracting the first piece, and then another agent from our office happened to know this guy. And so we were able to connect with him and contract that back half. We ended up with a little bit under an acre. Okay. So this was a small piece, 2 small parcels, 2 landowners, and we were able to figure out the contract for 2 of them for about an acre. Now, what happened is we went and talked to this neighbor to the north. Her name is Judy Brown. Judy said, hey, this is my value. This is my number. Wasn't even close to penciling. Like, she had a crazy expectation for price. And so, maybe one day that comes around. Maybe it doesn't. But ultimately, you know how it works. You have to have a willing seller, willing buyer. Timing has to work out. And so on this one, it was pretty neat. We were able to figure out 5 single-family lots on an acre. So they're tiny. They were about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. The unique part of this one, it's in a great part of Mill Creek. The values were very supportive. They're going to be about $1.2 million house on these little postage stamps up in Mill Creek. Because of kind of the value we were looking at, we were able to get the landowners a pretty good price. Again, it was kind of a redevelopment, but it also was an assembly. They were just the back portions of the lots, totally underutilized. None of them had any, shops or anything going on back there, or any agriculture, any gardens. It was just leftover ground that they weren't utilizing at all. So I want you to think about that. This is going to be a big part of you finding new deals. Whenever you come across a house, whenever you come across a seller, look at the surrounding houses, look at their property and be like, hey, does it make sense to sell off the back portion of your property? Now, as you guys know, most houses, 4 walls and a roof is worth, $350,000, $400,000, $500,000 in today's market. And so not every deal will have a tear down on it. You have to consider that value. You have to understand, even though that lot is worth $300,000, the house by itself on the lot is still worth, $450,000, $500,000. So you got to consider that. And that's why we didn't tear out those ones to the south and connect to 4200 South. It just made sense to just buy the back portion, subdivide it off. Any questions so far? Okay.
How long did it take to subdivide those ones right there?
So that one, total project time was about a year. So approvals from the city was about 9 months. Cool thing about that one, it only took us about 3.5, 4 weeks to develop it once we got it approved. Yeah, it was literally just the utility stubs and a little cul-de-sac that we had to pave. So you have all this time leading up to it just to be a little bit anticlimactic and just be done really quickly. So, all right. This one's a cool one too. And what I'm trying to share with you guys is think outside of the box, okay? Just because something's been somewhere forever, it's been a vacant piece, it's been a, little strip of land somewhere, just know that you can be creative, you can find a way to make it happen. So we're talking about underutilized property. Anybody know where the exchange is in Lehigh? The Edge built, just south of 2100 North. So when they built the exchange, I think it was like 1,800 units that they built, okay? To support that size of a project, they had to do some of their own temporary improvements while waiting for the regional improvements to happen with Lehigh City. So they actually had both these pieces as storm drain ponds. So this was a big pond catching all the detention for that project. And we had a pretty good relationship with the Edge Homes. And they just said, hey, we don't have any interest in developing commercial lots. We do have these leftover pieces of property. We'd be interested in selling them. So we structured a deal with them. The pond was essentially filled in and they were able to connect to some other areas. And because of that, we were able to structure a pretty cool deal to do a neighborhood commercial development. So again, they were using it as a detention pond. It was kind of leftover scrap land. We got approved for, it's 8 buildings, it's about 36,000 square feet of commercial. We've got a preschool that'll be done in February that's right here. Our building right here is pretty much done. It'll be a medical office type building. And our plan is to sell off some of it and then keep some of his long-term assets. So I'll offer to you guys what I offer to others as well. If you find a deal like this, we are not publicly traded. We are not a Fortune 500 company. We're not a national company. We'll partner with you. So if you want to leave your commission in, if you want to be a part of a deal, if you want to be part owners of it, we follow the same philosophy as Keller Williams. Let's build some real estate. Let's own it long term. We'll get you in the deal on that. Okay. So that's another part I want to offer is your buyer. Something like this, you can come in and own a pretty big percentage of a building and be a part of it. So any deal that you find, that's on the table always as we're trying to figure out something with you guys. All right, what do you notice about this one? What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think these are? Everybody see that? Okay. So this one's pretty cool. This was 6.7 acres in West Valley. Okay. And there were two parcels. And what happened was a family had a dad back in the 50s, bought these parcels and put up 19 like post-war shacks. They were like 600 to 800 total square feet. Not conforming, not permitted. He just put them all on two parcels. And he had them in the family portfolio as rentals since the 50s. Okay. I just happen to know the property manager who managed it. And he called me, kind of the same thing you guys do. You always ask for referrals. You always ask for, hey, do you got anything you're working on? You got any land that you know about? He said, I've got a family. They're interested in cashing out, but we have to take into consideration their cash flow that they're currently making to make sure that your purchase price offsets that it's worth it. And so we figured out something pretty cool with these guys. We ended up structuring a deal. We purchased it, and we ended up going to West Valley City and did a whole new redevelopment on it. So we had to go do a general plan change. Anybody know what the general plan is? Yeah. So in every city, they're forward looking. They say, hey, what's our city going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Let's have a plan and make some assumptions on what things are going to come in what areas of the city. So their general plan for this was low density residential. We changed the plan to do some medium density. We ended up taking the 19 houses, scrapping them, demolish all of them, and we got 38 lots approved. So this was a pretty cool redevelopment opportunity. We actually had a little bit of contention from some of our neighbors at first at some of the city meetings. Eventually they came around, and we made some pretty good friends with them. Ultimately, they came out in support of the project, and they came to us and they said, hey, you guys just eliminated the crime in our neighborhood. One of the guys who lives right here, he's lived there for like 45 years. He's like, I've seen drug deals happening almost every weekend. I saw a person shot on one of their patios out front. We are so grateful for you guys coming in to help us change this whole area. Going to bring some new homes, new, homeowners. Ultimately, these will be like in the 500s, low 600s. So pretty attainable housing, not affordable housing, but attainable, right? It'll be a move up for a lot of those residents in the area. So that was a fun redevelopment opportunity. Ultimately, this one took 14 months to get approved. Okay. And so we ended up selling this one to Alpine Homes, who's one of kind of our builder partners, and they're going to build it out. So that's kind of one of the redevelopment opportunities. Okay. What do you notice about this one? Just a residential property. Big trees. So this one of the first slides, I was telling you about an agent who brought it to us. She's participating on the deal with us on the financial side. Again, she represented a family trust, and she called and said, hey, the heirs of the trust are interested in selling the property. Do you have any insights on this? And what happened, it's a half acre. So one single lot, a half acre. It's out in West Valley, 4,000 south. Same thing, it's about 3,800 west. And I'd never seen this property before, never even knew about it, but I took about 10 minutes to look into it. This was one of the sneaky ones, okay? When this project was approved back in 1981, they just happened to get this one zoned too. So this property was zoned for 4,000 square foot lots. Nobody's ever looked at it since the 80s. And since they decided to sell, we were able to go in and get 4 single family lots approved on it. And again, it was already zoned. It's just been sitting there. This gal had it within her network with the family that owned it. And again, she made the call. We looked into it. We're like, hey, there's something here. It could just sell, for 350 grand. Terrible house, awful condition, total rip it down all the way to the studs and start over again, renovation if somebody wanted to do it. This one made sense for the tear down to do 4 single family lots on it. So again, just look at your network, look at your deals, look at even selling houses and just say, is there something here? Could we do something else with some of the remnant, with some of the leftover stuff? So those are some of the redevelopment things. Any questions so far? I've looked at a deal in Provo, and again, it was that one that had the mudslide that filled up the church. And so that was kind of the hillside overlay experience that I've had. It's pretty tough. It's pretty challenging. It brings another level of the improvements that you have to consider. So sometimes you have to have helical piers, you have to have retaining walls, you have to have, certain sensitivities as far as your building construction in order to do that. Ultimately, I didn't do that deal. Like I said to a few of you earlier, one of our core business values is to not make the news for any of our deals. So we're trying not to do that. But yeah, I've had a little bit of experience in there. So if you've got something up there, I'd love to take a look at it. So any other questions? Okay. Everybody getting something so far? Thinking about what you can maybe, be creative on deals that you see and what you're looking at? Something I wanted to point out that I've learned in all the deals, all the transactions that I've done, once you've done one, you've only done one. Every single deal is unique. It's just like your house sales. There's something funky on it, right? There's something unique that will impact either the value or the timing on it. We just had one that had a crazy easement on it that we had to get released from CenturyLink. And it took us about 90 days to get it released because we had to work with somebody nationally to ultimately approve that, right? That was unforeseen, so we weren't planning on it. But it's just, again, one thing after another that you learn every time you do a deal. So whenever you talk to a landowner and they say, neighbor down the street got 300,000 an acre, that's what I want. What are some things to consider in talking with them, helping them understand, walking through the valuation of the property? What do you think? What are some things that might impact it? Access, frontage, water, so utility connections, right? The neighbor down the street had a brand new curb, gutter, and sidewalk all the way down his whole frontage. Do you think that upped his value? Yeah. Your landowner has a ditch that has to be piped, no curb, gutter, no sidewalk, nothing. Do you think that impacts his value? Brings it down, right? So that's kind of the next section I want to talk to you about is your site analysis, okay? This isn't rocket science, guys. It's pretty easy. Look on the map, look at the property. If you need to talk to the city, if you need to talk to, a provider or something like that, anything that are property constraints will lessen the value of the property. If you have the giant power lines that crackle in the rain over the property, that brings down the value of your property. Okay. I don't know if any of you ever have looked at houses near or adjacent to power lines. There's some FHA constraints. There's actually a fall constraint on the poles. So if a pole will fall over near your house, they won't give you FHA financing on that home. So all that stuff is to consider. Now, our challenge in Utah, we can't just go to the next pasture, go to the next field down the road. We have mountains, we have lakes, we have other constraints with I-15, power corridors, whatever, right? So I just want you to think about that. If you have a piece of property, you got to look at everything, okay? On the utilities, that's also a big deal. A big hot thing in Utah right now is water, as far as water rights, water shares. So that's a very good question to ask whenever you're working with a landowner. Do you have any water rights? Do you have any water shares? If your property is going to be developed, that will need to be dedicated and given to the city. Now, sometimes they'll have excess water. And so what we like to tell people is like, hey, give enough for the development. If there's any excess, you keep it. Okay. Sewer connections, electrical capacity, natural gas availability, assemblage potential. Like I showed you on that first deal, if you've got a property owner that has 5 acres and then there's all these little chunks around it, get the first big one under contract first, because that's the main one to work with. Then it's like, hey, as soon as we're in, let's go talk to all the neighbors, right? Let's go knock on all their doors. Hey, if you guys want to sell your property and develop your land, this might be your only chance. Okay. We want to give you fair market value for you. We want to make it fair and equitable and a good transaction. Just know that this might be your only chance to jump in and be a part of this. Okay. Any questions on kind of site analysis? No? Now let's talk a little bit about value. Johnny's seen this, Cameron's seen this. So this is actually a project that Johnny and Cameron are a part of down in Salem, Utah. I'm helping develop it for them. They had to do 1.7 miles of sewer. The sewer was, at the lowest point, 24 feet deep. It was a 24-inch sewer. We literally had a river, an underground river, running through the site at all times. So we were pumping water for 14 months nonstop. That's a big, big deal. Just because you have a pasture, there could be a really big cost to turn it online. Okay. So this one ultimately, just the sewer line alone was $2.5 million. That's something you'll never see again, but it's a value that has to be considered. So ultimately, when you look at kind of the cost per foot, the impact on the acreage, I mean, it was about $17,000 to $20,000 an acre just to take off. Now, there's a balance there, right? Someone will say, well, you're the developer, you get all the upside, you need to just pay for that. Well, it's like, not really, right? If I wanted to buy it and just continue farming it, again, I would give you a certain value. If I want to develop it and change the use of the property, there has to be an understanding. There has to be a negotiation that, hey, that's a real value, has to get paid for to change the use. We got to put in a sewer line. So does that make sense? And again, it's just a numbers thing, but as long as you understand to set the expectation, educate your sellers or your owners and just say, hey, that's a real value. That's a real dollar. They're not just going to farm it. They're going to develop it, but they'll pay you a development price essentially. Okay. So we've talked a lot about pricing, valuations, timelines. We've talked a little bit about, what expectations to have on the timelines. So a couple things that we're running into a lot right now are people have awesome loans with awesome interest rates that they're sitting on, right? So on the example of our landowners up in Layton, they did not want to restructure their debt because they were, 2.99, 3.5% interest rates. But when we went to the lenders and said, hey, we want to release half the property that you have a note on, that's your security on the property, they said, no way. All right. So that's a big deal to think about. If they're going to sell off a portion, if they're going to sell the house, that debt has to be handled somehow. So either you get a partial release on their loan or you get them to pay it off with the proceeds. And ultimately, that's what that group decided to do. So think about that. Another thing to think about is if there's payback or pioneering costs, okay? So if your landowner held out for 10 years, but everybody around him developed, guy across the street put in millions of dollars of infrastructure, for your landowner to connect, there may be a connection fee. So that's like, again, referred to payback agreements, pioneering agreements. It's just a good question to ask. Like, do you know what happened when that was developed? Were you a participant in that at all? Do you know if they asked you to pay for some of the costs, those sorts of things? That could be a real value. That's, again, something to consider. With the city approvals right now, let me talk a little bit about that, just so you guys understand what different terminology is, what the timelines to expect are. So anybody know what a rezone is? What do you think is a rezone? It's a pretty basic question.
You're taking the type of property.
Rezoning it to a different type of use, right? So rezones in Utah, and this is state legislature, they require a public hearing, and that is most of the time done by a planning commission. Okay, so a planning commission is a group of volunteers The city assigns them to come on their planning board, essentially, and they help determine that the general plan will be put in place on the city for future developments. The planning commission then gives a recommendation. They say, hey, this applicant meets the general plan. This applicant meets all the requirements for the application. We will give you a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation for the city council to vote on it. Okay. So the city council is the governing body, the authoritative, the authority to decide on whether to rezone it or not. That process takes about 2 to 3 months. Okay. Because they have meetings certain times during the month, they have a review period. And so again, you know, if you're talking to your landowner, he's currently farming it, you say, hey, I want to rezone this to townhomes, just know that that is a pretty substantial time component. That's like, hey, if I'm giving you a value for townhomes, I don't even know if I can do townhomes for 3 months, right? So please be patient. Please come out in support of the project. I've had that in the negative way where some of the siblings came out and said, hey, we do not support this project. And you're like, geez, I'm trying to give your family millions of dollars. Can you just come and support it a little bit? So that's about a 3 to 4 month process. Then you go into platting. All right. Have you guys ever heard of preliminary plat, final plat? What do you think those are? Yep.
Red line in.
Yep. So a preliminary plat, you're essentially taking the layout or the concept of the property. And you're saying these are potential lot lines. These are open space areas. These are our roadways. This is the property boundary. This is what it will look like in a preliminary state. Okay. That also goes back to planning commission. So you guys can kind of see the pattern here. You have to, you know, go through these multiple checkpoints with the cities to ensure that it's meeting the standards and requirements that they have. All right. That also is about a 3 to 4 month process, depending on the city that you're in. Final plat is where you take that one step further. Okay. That's your final engineering. That's ensuring that your roads meet the city code. That's ensuring your utilities are at the right elevations, the right standards, the right specs. Okay. That process is done internally with the city staff. But again, multiple red lines, multiple reviews. They have to ensure that it's done right so that 10 years down the road, when it's a city sewer line, city owned line, it wasn't done wrong. There's not bellies in it. There's not bad connections, all those sorts of things. So what's unique is that both of these processes, you can have things that impact the financial viability of the deal. They could say, hey, you need to expand your detention pond. All right, there goes 2 lots. We need to have a concrete fence around the entire perimeter of the property. All right, there's a $500,000, right? We need to have, we want 6-inch trees, you know, every other lot in the whole project. And they have the right to do that. They have the ability to say, you know, we want this at a higher standard. We want this as a nicer product. And so that's another thing. You're just taking a risk. You got to find out if it works. Sometimes you do have to go back to the landowner if it's an issue that hurts the deal. Sometimes you just take it as a developer. You say, well, there goes a bunch of profit, but it's still a good deal. We're still going to move forward with it. We very rarely have had to retrade or renegotiate with landowners. We feel like we've got a pretty good experience. We've got a pretty good understanding of what the cities will require, but it's just the same as selling a house, guys. You can find out that the whole roof needs to be replaced. And you're like, well, if you want to still do a deal, this is a good buyer, you're a good seller. Let's meet in the middle and figure it out. Okay. So again, it could be from a raw pasture 12 months plus or minus for a deal to happen and take place. Now you will have developers, you will have buyers that'll be like, we feel good about it. We've got a good reputation with the city. You know what? We'll take a risk. We'll buy it once we get it zoned. We'll buy it once we get preliminary approval, those sorts of things. But that's kind of on a case by case basis. 9 times out of 10, you've got millions of dollars on the line. And so you want to make sure that you get exactly what you want when you get your approvals on.
saw some Jeff Bezos like a week ago. He was at some Miami, you know, Miami even just to build a house. It's like 3 to 6 months just to get a permit. To just start over, even if it's already developed and subdivided and all that. But I think that's one of the bigger challenges too that are affecting affordability is just the length of time and the red tape that developers have to jump through to get things approved. The cities aren't motivated by efficiency, profit, or speed. They're motivated by compliance. And then every year we go along, every city council, every state legislature, every government, like we just keep passing bills after bills after bills after bills. So even like this 12-month time period, like the amount of holding costs for a developer on land is astronomical. Like to pay interest, you know, engineers, attorneys, accountants to jump through all these hoops. And I think that's one of the things Jeff Bezos said. He's like, AI will revolutionize hopefully all of that. Just instead of taking months, they can be seconds to instantaneously approve some of that stuff, which I know that is a major motivator for some of the government entities to deploy technology just to speed this process up, because some of the, you know, the affordability could be linked 10 to 25% of the cost, you know, just jumping through all these hoops, which I think the efficiency would be a lot. Hopefully positive soon. So, and even noticed some of the cities that just announced last week that they're moving all their land records onto the blockchain. Did you see
Really?
that? I think it was in Michigan or something. I have to send it to
Hmm.
Even that would be another great, you know, step. So,
Yeah. And the challenge we have in Utah, you know, has everyone seen what's happened in Vineyard? Everyone's seen what's happened in Lehigh and Saratoga Springs, right? The cities are growing so fast that the staff cannot keep up. Like we're doing in Salem City. Johnny's been in this deal for almost 5 years now. And they just got their first houses going. So that's 5 years from start to houses. They just don't have the staff. So they're like, hey, thanks for submitting your application. You're one of 100 applications in the city right now. We'll get to it, sort of thing, right? And then that happens to be a very mediocre, not a great review. And then you have more reviews because they're like, oh, we missed that. Sorry, we just saw that for the first time, you know, that sort of stuff. So we're definitely going through some growing pains that ultimately trickle back down to, sorry, you know, landowners, it just takes a little bit more time. You need to be patient on it. You know, if you're looking for a closing 2025 calendar year, it's not going to be the same value as if you were to hold out and work with us and partner with us essentially until, you know, next summer or something like that. So good comment, Johnny. Any other questions or comments kind of on timing, process, what's going on? No? Okay. So, a couple things that, and sorry, some of the things aren't working on here. It's pretty cool on my screen, but not up here. So, you know, you're trying to just structure a successful transaction. Same thing when you're selling a house. Let's have a qualified buyer. Let's have a qualified seller. Both have good intent to make the transaction work. And so you're working through all different things. So you might be dealing with a trust. You might be dealing with heirs that want a certain return on the value. You know, I've dealt with siblings that are rich, siblings that are poor, and siblings that are rich are just like, I just want a good deal. You know, siblings that are poor are like, I have to have this value, you know, that sort of thing. You can structure kind of a creative program with them. You could say, hey, you know, say you want $5 million, I can give you $4 million, but you can keep a handful of the lots for you and your family. You know, you can have a cool family cul-de-sac in there. I've done a deal like that. Or, hey, you guys are a very well-off family. How about you be a financial partner? You know, do some seller financing, get them upside there. You can figure out a way for them to even go through and get new houses built from the home builders. So every family's unique. They all have their own wants, needs, requests that you just kind of have to flush out and figure it out. But ultimately, if I'm your buyer, I'll look at all those creative opportunities to try and find the best results, the best solution there. Understanding motivations. So, you know, I've dealt with families that are like, this will be Major Farms. I'm not selling it to you unless you call it Major Farms. We have a family monument out front. You keep the family freaking log cabin that's been there since the 1800s on the property somehow. There's very unique motivations, huge emotional ties to property. You know, they want to have a legacy, a heritage that's remembered on the property. So you just, you know, ask all the questions. Like, does it mean a big deal for you to have it named after you? Do you want your kids named on the streets and things like that? Like, so there's definitely different motivations. And again, it's ultimately a relationship with the property owner. Hey, I'm not a 30-day one and done. You're never going to call me again. The weird part, I almost never have repeat customers, right? You guys get it on the house side where it's like, hey, call me in 5 years when you're ready to move up. I'll be your agent again. They have one piece of property. It's been held since the 1800s in the family. You know, they're cashing out, they're buying their, you know, second vacation home in St. George or whatever. So it is a really big deal to have a strong relationship with them. You might be talking to them for years until they're ready to sell. But if they can trust you, they know you're looking for their best interest at heart. You want to be their first call. It's the same thing with buying and selling a house. You want to be the first call if they're ready to go. Okay. Next thing, how you work with us. Again, you bring a deal and you say, Jake, I've got this piece of property. Help me understand it. Okay. We do this day in and day out. If I want to sell a house, I'm calling one of you. It's not my thing. I have a license. I don't do it. But if you call me, I'll say, hey, we've got every Wednesday, we do a deal analysis meeting. Okay. So we look at all the new properties. I have Fred, who underwrites the deal, looks up the zoning, looks up the utilities, looks up all that sort of stuff. And we analyze it. We say, hey, you know, if you just want to know a value, if you just want to know what the property's worth, if you want us to help look at what the land's worth and then what the house is worth and then what they're worth separated, we can do all of that. Okay. You're more than welcome to come to that Wednesday meeting. We're in Cottonwood Heights, so you might have to drive a little bit. But again, if you got something really cool and specific, we'll give you the best look possible. We'll help arm you with the best thing. If it doesn't work for us, that's fine. You know, we wish you the best of luck. We'll help coach you and guide you in what the best route is. And then maybe on the next deal, it works out. Okay. We'll structure a pretty cool deal where it's like, hey, you know, Chris, I want you to come with us to the city meetings. Come learn about it. Come see what happens. Come see how the process works. Part of that, you know, we'll have your normal commission. Maybe there's some management fee in there for you to manage some of the process and do some things that way. Okay. And then ultimately it's like, hey, I work with almost every municipality across the Wasatch Front. I work with engineers, geotechnical engineers, surveyors, you know, unique property studies, whether it be wetlands or whatever. I've got the connections that can help figure out what those unique constraints are that are specific to that property. So, you know, again, I'm your buyer. I want to look at anything you have. The ultimate purpose of today is, hey, you can learn a little bit more about the process, but then if you go find one deal a year, right, that's a big supplement to your income, and you know that you can trust in us to go handle it and take care of it. Okay. Any questions so far?
Strategies for not just with the seller getting an offer that is just so open-ended, we're gonna let them draw the city, you know, maybe if this overlay zone disappears, or, you know, basically an eternal contract.
Yeah.
That has so many conditions, that it could be tied up for 2 years and then they walk out.
Yeah, great question. And that happens. They're conditional contracts, right? That if I get this approval, then I'll buy it for this value. We try to stray away from those in any way possible. So we'll do a set due diligence timeline that's like, hey, at the end of due diligence, we'll have a pretty substantial amount of earnest money that's hard, non-refundable. If we even walk away, one, you learned a ton of stuff about your property to better understand what's going on. Maybe you got a survey, you got a concept out of it, maybe you got the zoning done, and we're like, hey, it doesn't work. Here's the earnest money, we're out, but you get to keep all that stuff and that value that we added to the transaction. Two, we have a set hard date for closing. Now, again, I'll try to be an open and clear about that, but it's like, guys, listen, you're in Saratoga Springs. I hate Saratoga Springs. Just plan on like a 12 to 14 month transaction, right? And so, and that if that doesn't work, then it's like, all right, maybe there's a price adjustment to make up for the risk in closing earlier without those approvals and those entitlements. But again, we always try to have a set closing date. We'll put some extensions and stuff in there sometimes where it's like, hey, we think it will take 9 months, but in the event it takes 12 months, we'll put up some more earnest money as an extension fee just to make you feel comfortable to give us that additional amount of time. So those are some of the tools that I use to help add a little bit of comfort. Signable contracts. Sometimes it can be in their benefit and their favor, right? So I've done one where we ended up having a buyer in place before we even closed with our landowner. We did not assign the contract, but our buyer was ready to perform. And so ultimately it meant a quicker transaction for the landowner, a quicker ending for that. Now, there's risk in that. If your landowner wants certain things done a certain way, like I said, the naming, the monuments or whatever, if you assign that, you kind of can lose control on that a little bit. So there are certain things that you can do to do that, but I usually put in our contracts like, hey, we want it assignable to one of our own entities. Maybe we choose to keep some of the properties and we'll set up an LLC to own rentals within the project or something like that. So I want the ability to assign it with one of our own affiliates. If I bring in a financial partner, right, and the financial partner wants to own half of it or sell half of it or something like that, allow us the ability to assign it to that, right? Or sometimes I'll put in like if we have select builder partners that we know would fit really well on this deal. Like if I had to do an Alpine, I'd get Millhaven or whoever that's up there just crushing it and be like, hey, it likely will go to them eventually, or some of the project will go to them. Do you care if I allow some of the assignment to be written in as Millhaven Homes or whatever, right? But again, our hope is to buy it, develop it, sell it to the right end user, or keep some of it as some of our long-term assets. So we try not to have it assignable. Good question. What else? Johnny?
I would just talk them risk in general and just feel these guys about that, like these land deals in the last 15 years, I've seen so many more of our top, smartest, highest producing agents lose money trying to do a land deal by a long shot than ever actually successfully trying to do it themselves. There's just so many complexities, and even me, I went back and got my master's in real estate development just to teach me that I don't know what the freak I'm doing, and I need to partner up with these guys on stuff like this. And I think one of the biggest challenges is when agents are trying to pretend like they know they're doing and talking prices, and it just gives false expectations to some of these sellers when there's so many other things that are going to come down the road. And just knowing Boyd and Jake for so long, like just the expertise and the clarity of just what they really think is going to have to happen to make a deal work, and authentically and honestly communicating it to these landowners. A lot of times, sometimes people sneak in like, well, I could pay more for the land, and then they just go down the road and waste 6 months of these farmers, time frame just for them to come back to grow on this. And even just when it comes to utilities and UDOT and all these different things, that it's just my recommendation always is just like get them involved as early as possible, and just really use it as riding shotgun and an education experience. But it's just been cool to see, some of the things they've done. So just kind of throwing out my recommendation on getting, land deals or leads or whatever.
I appreciate that, Johnny. Thank you. And again, timing is everything. If I can help you understand a little bit better and it just doesn't work, that means you and I have a better rapport for the next one that you go find. Right? You understand kind of what our buy box is. You understand what some of our constraints are. You understand if I've got a project in Mapleton right down the road, it makes sense once you build a good relationship with the city to just keep going, find another deal. Like we've done 3 in West Valley in the last 6 months. I know their process. The planners know me by name, right? That goes a long way to help projects do better. So if I can be of help, I would love it. If I can help you understand and train you a little bit better, that's great. Just, I know that it'll pay off later on down the road, right? And just to Johnny's point, like we just looked at a deal. Wes found it up in Bountiful. Really cool deal, kind of, high visible project, high value project that would have some pretty high end townhomes and a little bit of commercial on it. We were, what was it, Wes? 200,000 off from their asking price, roughly 300,000. So we were 300,000 apart on a $3 million deal. They chose this other buyer 5 months ago. 5 months ago, who said, "All right, fine, we'll pay your asking price." A week before closing, they could not get their financing. And so again, that just used all of that landowner's time when we could have almost had a project approved, done, closed, right? And so to Johnny's point, time is a huge consideration in these transactions. It's like, hey, if you pick the right horse, that can make it work in 6 months, or that will just waste 6 months of your time. And so, think about it very carefully, especially if you're selling the family farm that's been in for 200 years, right? So, how you can get a hold of me? My email is pretty easy, jake@growdev.com. My phone number's up there. Let's go find some deals together. Let's go find some land opportunities. I'm doing a deal with Clay. I'm working on a deal with Cody. I'm doing 4 other deals with some of the agents from Midvale. And again, it's you bring one, great. We'll look at it. We'll give you honest feedback. We'll give you quick feedback. And if it's just not in the ballpark, it's not in the ballpark. But again, I want to be a resource for you. I want to help you and see if there's something we made there. So any other questions, any other feedback? Kind of fishing up a little earlier here, but you guys are pretty talkative, so I went fast. Brian? Yeah, that's a great question. Good question. Best thing to look at is the map. What's surrounding the property? If they're all quarter acres and third acres, it's very likely that it will just transition and keep that going, right? So if you're like, hey, that piece next to us, 10 acres, they got 30 lots on it, that's 3 lots to the acre, right? So that's pretty easy math that you can look at and say, what's the surrounding use? Can I do something similar? That's probably like your base case use of the property. Now, city codes change, general plans, zoning maps change, right? So in your older mature cities, like for example, that West Valley one where we got 4 lots on the half acre, that zone doesn't even exist in their code anymore. So it's not like you can just say, hey, what's right next door? Let's go do the exact same thing, because again, they evolve and change. So, but that's once you get into the weeds a little bit further. Another good tool is plus or minus 25% of the acreage has to go to roads and open space. Okay. Set your connection points. If it's a funky shape, really unique boundary lines and stuff like that, that number only goes up 30%, 40%, because you got to account for waste. You got to account for the weird pie-shaped lots. You got to account for stuff that just doesn't make it as efficient. So again, 10 acres, quarter acre lots, 10,000 square foot lots, you would think, oh, I can get 4 lots to the acre. No, by the time you back out roads and efficiency, it's about 3.5. Okay. So it was listed on the zoning map. Okay. Google's your friend, guys. AI is your friend. Jump on Gemini, jump on Grok, whatever you use, and just say, what's the zoning for this property? And it will just fill it all out. Okay. It'll give you links to the zoning maps, links to the general plan. And again, you don't want to get too into the weeds with your sellers. Like, hey, you guys can do, 20 units to the acre townhomes here. This is pretty awesome. That means you're worth $1 million an acre. It's like, whoa, back up a little bit. There's probably some constraints, but yeah, it was right on the zoning map. We pulled it up and I was like, what the heck is R14 zoning? And then I pulled up the code and they're like, oh, it's not in the city